Hello YouTube, this is Curator II here with another video. This time we will be discussing the 2014 rule change. Please note that this is not a tutorial on how to play, but simply a tool to help people understand the new format. The rules will be changing the Yu-Gi-Oh meta a lot, and I'm very excited to see where the metagame goes from here. There have been three main changes. 1. A new monster type has been added. 2. The player who goes first no longer draws in their first turn. And both players can now have a field spell. In addition, the battle phase has also changed a lot, but we'll get into that part later. So with a new monster type that has been added, the field is going to be changing from this into this. As you can see, two new zones have been added on either side of the field. These are the zones where you can play your pendulum monsters, but we'll get to that part later. Let's go over the new drawing rule first. This one's pretty simple. If you go first, you skip your draw phase on your first turn and don't draw a card. If you go second, you can go right on ahead and still draw. Next, let's talk about field spells. It's a really new, interesting rule. You can have 2 of them now. This is a very simple rule, but will have a lot of game-changing implications. Let's go over those. For this example, I'll be using the field spell card Luminous Spark, which gives all light monsters an extra 500 attack, but subtracts 400 defense. Here, the tombstone represents the graveyard and the deck represents itself. Both players start out with one Wolf Lightsworn Beast on their side of the field. Next, the player on the right plays Luminous Spark. Since Wolf is a light-type monster, they both gain 500 attack and lose 400 defense, regardless of which side of the field they're on. The player on the right will end his turn. Now the player on the left will activate his Seal of Orichalcos. Any time before July 14th, 2014, Luminous Spark would have been replaced by Seal of Orichalcos. However, with the new rules, both players can have one field spell on their side of the field. For the sake of this example, the player on the left will also play his Luminous Spark, sending Seal of Orichalcos to the graveyard, essentially doubling the amount of gain and loss experienced by both wolves on both sides of the field through the field spell. So what you learned through this example was that both players can have one field spell on their side of the field, and the effects of the field spell still apply for both sides of the field. However, a player may get rid of his own field spell by replacing it with another one of his own. Unfortunately, this makes field spells basically continuous spell cards with their own special zone. I personally like the old rules regarding field spells better, as I think the new format takes away some of their dynamic. However, that is neither here nor there. Now let's get on to the biggie, the pendulum monsters. Pendulum monsters are kind of like a fusion between monsters and spells. Kind of like if Blue Eyes White Dragon and Pot of Greed walked into Fusion Gate together. Time Gazer Magician would be their child. Here's another graphic to further demonstrate my point. Pendulum monsters can either be monsters or spells under certain conditions, but can never be both at the same time. Let's take a look at these things, shall we? Pendulum monsters have a lot of features that other monsters do. They have a name, an attribute, a level, a picture, a type, and an attack and defense. Some new things are the pendulum scales, which we'll talk about later, and the fact that they have 2 effects. The top one being used for when it's activated as a spell card in the pendulum zone, and the bottom effect being used when it's summoned as a monster. Pendulum monsters are placed in the main deck, and are drawn just like every other non-extra deck card. To make a pendulum monster a spell card, place them face up in either of your pendulum zones. It does not matter which zone you place the pendulum monster in, as the only thing it will affect is the pendulum scale, which we will talk about soon. You cannot play your pendulum monsters in the back row. You also cannot set a pendulum monster in either the spell trap or pendulum zone. When it is a spell, the top effect of the pendulum monster is active, as we talked about before. When it is activated, a pendulum monster is considered to be spell speed 1, or the equivalent of a normal spell like Pot of Greed. They cannot be activated on the opponent's turn, like a quick play. Make a pendulum monster be treated as a monster card, just normal summon or set it in the monster card zone. Its bottom effect will come into play. You can set pendulum monsters in the monster card zone. Both summoning and activating a pendulum monster is chainable. As I said previously, pendulum monsters can only be a spell or monster at any given time, so cards like Mystical Space Typhoon that destroy spell and trap cards only work on pendulum monsters in their pendulum zones. Tentatively, cards that destroy monsters like Smashing Ground can only be used on the pendulum monster in the monster card zone. You cannot attack a pendulum monster in their pendulum zone. When a pendulum monster is destroyed, regardless of being in spell or monster form, and regardless of being face down or not, it is placed face up in the extra deck instead of being sent to the graveyard. I have not yet been able to find any card rulings about things that destroy and send to the graveyard their targets. Unfortunately, these things are only a few weeks old. If you have any answers, please leave them in the comments below. Now to learn about the pendulum scale. When a pendulum monster is placed in a pendulum zone, you need to take note of the number corresponding to the color on the sides of the pendulum monster. This is the pendulum scale that will be used to perform pendulum summons when this card is in the pendulum zone. Whew, that's a lot of pendulums. But what can you do with this? Why, swarm your field, of course. During either of your main phases, if both pendulum zones are occupied, you can perform a pendulum summon. Look at the corresponding pendulum scale to the pendulum zone color on both of your monsters. Now you can summon as many monsters from your hand as you want, as long as those monsters' levels are in between the pendulum scale. You can also summon pendulum monsters that are face up in your extra deck. However, the levels have to be in between the scales too. In this case, you can pendulum summon monsters that are level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. These monsters can be summoned in attack position or face up defense position. For this example, both Dark Magician and Hypnocorn are summonable because their levels are between 2 and 7. Odd Eye's Pendulum Dragon is also summonable because it is between levels 2 and 7 and face up in the extra deck. Vanilla and Blue Eyes White Dragon are not summonable because their levels are not in between the pendulum scale. You cannot summon cards like Dark Armed Dragon that require special summoning and conditions. You also cannot special summon cards whose summoning methods are in the game rules, like Fusion, Synchro, or Exceeds monsters. Additionally, you cannot pendulum summon monsters from your deck or your graveyard, only from your hand or face up in the extra deck. Finally, pendulum summons are not chainable actions. Finally, the battle phase order has been changed quite a bit, but you can go look up those rules yourself on the Konami website. I'll leave a link in the description below. Well, that's it. That's all you need to know about the new rules. Now let's get into some of the competitive implications of these new rules. Due to the field spell buff, archetypes that have very useful field spells like Gravekeepers, Ancient Gears will get a huge boost. Deck archetypes that revolve around field spells like Earthbound Immortals and Malefics will also get a huge boost. I hope to see a lot more of these in competitive play. Fast summoning decks like Frogs, X-Sabers, Blackwings, Infernities, and Teledad will also get huge competition from Time Gazer Magician and his buddies. FTKs, or first turn kill combos, will also receive a lot of nerf from the new no first turn draw rule. With the new pendulum monsters and the fact you can have 2 field spells, everybody has a reason to run 3 MST in their deck. Personally can't wait till Heavy Storm comes back. Before this rule change, we had to combine monsters, spells, and traps into our deck to make something good. No, Blackluster Soldier, you're a ritual monster. Nobody uses you anymore. Go home. As I was saying, now we'll have to balance pendulum monsters in there, and make sure to come out with good deck combos that can draw consistently and still win games. All in all, I don't care for the new draw rule, but I can live with it. Pendulum monsters are pretty neat, and I look forward to using some of the good ones. I really don't like the 2 field spell idea, as it seems they're just taking away a unique dynamic that only field spells had previously. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching. If you like our stuff, make sure to check out our channel and subscribe. I really hope this helped you guys figure out what's up with the new format. This is Curator II of Team Scrub, signing off.